Hello and welcome to Connect. I'm your host, Randy Shabailo. On today's show, we'll have Lenore Swystun with the Saskatoon Heritage Society, as well as Valerie Reeb with Art in the Garden near Langham. As always, we'd like to connect with you. Email us at rtvsaskatoon@rci.rogers.com. Find us on Facebook at ConnectYXE and catch past interviews on our YouTube channel. The Saskatoon Heritage Society is celebrating its 50th anniversary, and we have President Lenore Swystun with us in the studio. Thanks so much for coming down.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
I want to talk about the Saskatoon Heritage Society because 50 years is a long time in itself, but the organization's been very active over the years on different issues, saving a lot of properties and raising that overall conversation in the community. What can you tell us about the 50th anniversary, where it came from and how it got to be here?
Yeah, good question. And I mean, what's interesting is you and I are getting to be in that collectible stage ourselves,
Absolutely,
right?
Yep.
So that's always interesting. And, Saskatoon Heritage Society came about in a time frame of Saskatoon in the 1970s. So go back to 1976. There was not that many people like there is today. Like we're at over 300,000. It would have been in the 100,000 range, not even. You can remember that when you were a kid, right? We had flourishing 20th Street, where you know only too well. Downtown, we had the bays of the world. The Midtown Plaza was just being developed. The bridge that was going over Idlewild was taken down, and you had a whole revamping. Things like the Centennial Auditorium that's now called TCU, came to be and all this sort of time. But there was also at that time a lot of conversation about development on the riverbank, and there were some really historic buildings in the downtown. And kind of a confluence of both those issues really created, at the time, the Saskatoon Environment Society and the Heritage, taking a look at, well, how are we going to protect that story of Saskatoon? How are we going to protect our riverbank? Meewasin Valley came up in that era, and also there was the Standard Trust building, where the Sturdy Stone Centre, which really was a kind of the pinnacle that pushed the Saskatoon Heritage Society to be. Most people think the Capitol Theatre was the one that did. That came a little bit later. It really was the Standard Trust and proposed development that was occurring on the riverbank. So you had people like Peggy Sargent and her husband Bill Sargent and others at that time who said, we need to have a conversation more about heritage, and so the Heritage Society was formed. So what do? We educate, we advocate, and we celebrate heritage and try to inform people about what's going on in heritage. You said, what are some of our successes? I'd say we probably had more losses than anything, and we also sit on the Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee, so we're a rep on that committee. We're also a member of the National Trust, which is a national heritage voice that tries to conserve and all that sort of stuff, and we try to influence the policies of the city. We try to, educate people as to, what building is older and what's significant about that building or that neighborhood. So we've had losses, though. And I think, you probably could think of some that come to mind beyond the Capitol Theatre. Whether it's a Castle School or whether it's a Gathercole on the riverbank. So what do we do now? We continue to do that work. It's not just about buildings that have designation on them. We work to get buildings designated, municipally, provincially, or nationally accordingly. We look at stewardship of naturalized areas and how to recognize the natural heritage of places, things like the Northeast Swale in that. So we have a voice to those sorts of things. We don't have a museum as a city yet, so we think about, well, where do we put things like Klinkskill's watch? So those kinds of things come up in terms of how do we create other partnerships for doing that. We work with BIDs, business improvement districts, in terms of how to tell the stories and have tours and point out what used to be and why it matters to have those stories out there. So that's the kind of things we do.
I think it's important that you touched on the losses but successes. I think one of the most important takeaways I've learned is that once these buildings are gone, they're gone.
That's
We
right.
can talk about intangible heritage now, but we always refer to things like the Roxy Theatre as an example.
That's right. That's a great example.
Coming up on 100 years old. What is the fragile nature that it is involved in, and removing graffiti off of fragile brick and things like that? Do you see any opportunities with policy making nationwide in terms of being able to designate areas or buildings? Is there any incentives for people to latch on and create more of a heritage district?
Geez, wouldn't that be nice?
Huh?
It would be, right? I mean, it really is left to the municipal and the provincial in terms of policy, and municipalities themselves can do a lot to show leadership. We do have a heritage plan with the City of Saskatoon, and we do have a heritage policy. You and I have both lent our voices to saying that we need to do better in those areas in terms of incentivizing businesses, small businesses and residents, to be incentivized to want to rehabilitate their properties, to do sympathetic renovations to them. There's a stigma out there. People think that if you designate a building or something like that, you can't change it. That's not true. Right on our books right now in terms of a heritage program, we have grants available and we have taxes in lieu and all that sort of stuff that can be there for people to apply for a designation and receive that. That doesn't mean you can't fix your window. That doesn't even mean you can't put it into another material. Yeah. But people don't know that. So they're under the impression either you have to really conserve it and fossilize it in that time period, or maybe it's cheaper to get rid of and start anew. What we always advocate for to say is heritage is part of good development. A building that's already built is a good building if it stands the test of time, and you can upgrade things. So we are always advocating to the city to do more in terms of putting more investment into having people take care of places like the Roxy, and for the city to also see that as incentives that they should contribute in, just like they contribute to new businesses and developments that come to the city.
So with a 50-year celebration, it's a huge milestone. What are there events planned, or do you want to invite people to anything in particular?
You bet.
Yeah?
Ooh, and that's why we're on today, right?
Okay.
I mean, in part, right, is like as the 50th anniversary, we've got one event that's coming up really soon here, June 20th, for anybody that is in Saskatoon.
It's a Saturday, yeah.
That's right. It's a Saturday starting at noon. You can head yourself down to River Landing. And right where the Sid Buckwald Bridge is, or what some of us call the Idlewild Bridge, go underneath there, because then things start to happen. We're going to have a wall and a mural wall there, and some retired architects that have really done their life's work in Saskatoon in terms of buildings. Folks like Charles Olfert and Henny Klippenberg and Colin Tennant will be there. We've invited yourself to be part of this as well, Randy, because of your wisdom and experience and history with our city. And we have a lot of other tours. I mean, Wasson will be heading up that. Terry Hockness, who's also carries the Saskatoon history page that a lot of people follow on Facebook. He'll be doing a tour. So there's a number of tours that will be starting out at noon. We have Jeff O'Brien, who's the city archivist, who's playing the MC. We're going to have a coloring corner for kids that is set up, which is fantastic. So there's something for everybody. Plus, we have a whole number of acts coming to a stage that'll be set up by the old pump house. So where the AL coal site is, we're down where the old Saskatoon City Market, or new old Saskatoon Market was. There will be a whole bunch of events there too. So June 20th is a really neat day because it gives us a way of kind of telling the history of Saskatoon. All those events are free, by the way. So it's really a place for newcomers to Saskatoon, but also people that have been here for a long time that are just looking at a refresh or maybe learning something they didn't know already.
I think that's important, both from the newcomer to the city to get a sense of where they've moved to, but I've noticed that when there's invitations like this and celebrations that you and I have been to, that longtime residents who've helped build and develop the city, lived here a long time, they have stories as well. So there's I guess this is the building, but here's also what happened on this corner or in this area, or milk deliveries, whatever the case might be. Are there some stories that you're looking to build or garner from the public?
Yeah, and that's what we're going to be doing, is collecting some of those stories right on site. And that's where, we've invited you and others to come who have that, and we're going to document some of that. And we hope to share that out into the future, into perpetuity. So you can go on tours, but we're also going to be listening to your stories. And also we're going to have people on site that will be sharing some of that story, including the history of River Landing. We've got Alan Wallace, of course, who was the former city planner for the city. He's going to be coming out and kind of pointing out, here's what happened at River Landing over time. We want to get those layers of the different points of view on the city.
What happens with going forward from 50 years with the organization? Is there, with the National Trust as an example, I've learned over time that there's some things that can move if it's diligent and there is a focused effort. Do you see some political will, or is it always about money? Or where do you tend to focus your efforts as the organization?
Geez, we wish it wasn't always about money, but it is. But I mean, it's always trying to provide that case about why heritage matters, right? When you're bringing business into town, it's about telling the story of that city and what attracts people to it. So it is, in fact, those stories and those buildings and those neighborhoods that draw people in, whether it's the Broadways, whether it's the 2nd Avenues and 20th Streets and 21st Streets and 3rd Avenues, whether it's Meewasin Valley. Those things matter. At a national level, we're always trying to get better standards out there that can be applied by municipalities. So we're, in fact, trying to do that. But fun little fact, for instance, there's renovations going on in the Besborough. Besborough is not a designated building yet. We're trying to change that as a heritage society. We need the owner of that building to want to see the value of designation on it, and we also need the city to see that value too, to be municipally designated. Why does that matter? Because when things aren't designated, we tend to maybe not value them as much, which means over time, maybe we forget about it, and then the next thing you know, it's gone. So even some of the most iconic buildings that people can connect to community, there's a reason why heritage societies exist, is to advocate to make sure that they still exist over time. So we're continuing that advocacy.
Appreciate all that you and the organization are doing to keep the city intact in that way, to tell that story. And we'll see you on Saturday, June 20th at River Landing.
Yes. And
best of luck on your 50th anniversary.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show.
We'll be right back, folks.